Hey there, this is Dan. You're watching The Salty Sea, and it's been about a month, maybe more, since I've put a video out, but I had to return to talk about Vexmor, the weird little demon who is on everybody's mind. Actually, not a little demon. Here to help me out is a buddy who has been running Vexmor quite a bit, Cody. Cody, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Dan?
I'm doing okay. Despite just losing to you in the finals of a tournament in a Vexmor
Barely.
mirror. Yeah, doing well. Excited to talk about Vexmor, excited to be talking about Warcry again. Let's get straight into Vex with kind of the most basic fundamentals. I think I'm starting here with the profile where I've just blocked out the two things that that are lies on the profile. Vexmor pretty much always is going to be getting a +1 attack blessing, so will almost always be 180 points instead of 150. I don't know. Can you ever imagine a time when you wouldn't be blessing it?
No, I really don't think so. I think
Yeah,
for 150 points, you don't run Vex that way. Um, the stats on Vex make me really curious if they're starting to design with blessings in mind.
yeah,
Did they do one attack because it's funny, or did they do one attack because they know it's actually two attacks?
man, we'll never know. I mean, it feels like they did one attack because it's funny.
I
Um,
think so.
yeah, I think so, but obviously it's two attacks.
Yeah.
um, and he's got he does some stuff, and I think it's worth kind of breaking down the stuff that he does before we really dive deep into him, because I think we're gonna talk about sort of every single angle of this guy, or gal, or whatever Vexmor is doing these days. First, we've got the reaction, Triumphant Tittering. A fighter can make this reaction without forfeiting one of their actions in that battle round, and can make this reaction even if they already activated this battle round. A fighter can make this reaction after another friendly fighter with the Thricefold Discord rune mark is slain. This fighter makes a bonus move action or a bonus attack action. Um, so it's essentially just worth one free action over the course of a game, because pretty much always Vex or one of Vex's friends, if you bring a friend, is going to eventually get killed. Vexmor, only 25 wounds, even at toughness 6, still dies a solid amount of the time. Now, obviously, you really want Vexmor's friends to die instead of Vexmor, but sometimes it happens the other way. Then we've got Lithe and Swift. Add 3 to the fighter's move characteristic for their next move action in this activation. And then we've got Locus of Excruciation. Until the end of the battle round, add 1 to the strength characteristic of melee attack actions made by visible friendly fighters while they are within 6 inches of this fighter. Cody, would you use either of these abilities much over just Rampage and Onslaught?
You want to be onslaughting when you can. I do
Yeah.
still use Lithe and Swift. Getting in with one attack, especially if the target's already activated, is better than no attacks.
Yeah, for sure.
And being able to threaten on Live and Swift, I think you have an 8-inch threat range. It is
Mhm.
good. It's
Yeah.
it's not as good as a Rampage. Was it Locust Excruciation?
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine a situation where you want to do that,
Agreed.
but having it is better than not having it.
Sure. Absolutely. I agree. I can't really imagine a situation because obviously it doesn't matter for Vexmor with that strength 10.
Yep.
Who cares? So then it's like, what situation is it going to be doing more than just using that triple as an onslaught for Vexmor?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just can't. You have to like build it. You'd have to like put all the perfect fighters onto the board specifically to make it happen. Like I don't think it could
Right.
ever happen in
If,
a
if
game.
there's like a really specific situation where you can double move Vex to get them into position, but they're not attacking, and you have someone else that is attacking, and you have nothing better to do with a triple.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's a long. It's a lot of
You're not building
conditionals.
around it. It's not your
Yeah.
game plan, but it's
Yeah.
there.
Um, you mentioned that you pretty much always want to be onslaughting with Vexmor, and I agree. I even find that sometimes Rampage, unless it's a really high Rampage, even low Rampages are so disappointing because 3 attacks, a Rampage attack 3 times is doing less for you than if you can manage to just attack twice with Onslaught.
Yep.
So ideally, yeah, Onslaught is the answer. And it's even crazy when you look at the sort of spread of outcomes. Vexmor is really disappointing when you do 0 or 5 damage. And if you don't have Onslaught, you do 0 or 5 damage 44% of the time, which is wild. That's tough. But with Onslaught, that drops to 21% of the time, which is much, much better. And with Onslaught, you're pretty much always doing, not pretty much always, but like most of the time you're doing 10 or 15, and that's a really happy place to be. 15, if you can get it, 15 just feels so good coming out of Vexmor in just one attack. It just feels absurd. So you want to be maximizing your ability to do that as often as you can. I think one place to start, I want to start talking about, now that we've talked about kind of the what of what Vexmor does, I want to get into the like how good is Vex actually, because I think a lot of people have a lot of sort of worry. They remember the FOMO Crusher and how ubiquitous that is. I think there's a lot of worry that Vexmor is going to be equally ubiquitous and crazy. So I wanted to compare with the Annihilator Prime. Cody, I know you don't play Annihilator Primes, but you've played against them quite a bit, right?
I play against them a lot, yeah.
They've become a pretty important part of the Minnesota meta, for sure. And so I think the Annihilator Prime with no Onslaught against DPA 4 or less is actually going to do more on average than a Vexmor will. Now, there's a lot of sort of plus and minus here. For example, Vexmor has that 2-inch reach, so the 190 point Annihilator isn't doing that, but the 190 point Annihilator has some pretty crazy abilities like Blood for the Blood God. Vex would love to have Blood for the Blood God. The Annihilator has it. They call it something different. Or the bonus attack action is great on the Annihilator Prime if it's taken some damage, stuff like that. So there's sort of positives and negatives about how easy they are to use. But without using Onslaught, if it's just sort of running around vanilla, you'll see that the chance of whiffing is just so much lower. Like you get, I think, a 2% chance of whiffing completely, and even only doing 3 damage is only like 7%. And so then, and then 5 is like 3%. So the whole thing, whiffing to do 0 or 5 damage is only, even without Onslaught, is only like 11 or 12%, I think. Whereas Vexmor, even with Onslaught, you're still whiffing, you're missing 21% of the time. So you're missing 1 out of 5 times. So that is just a part of the Vex experience, right? I mean, you've talked to me, like, how does it feel when Vex just takes a big swing and a miss?
In the first round of that tournament, turn 2, I think, I had a Rampage, a 6-inch Rampage set up with Vex running into 3 Dwarves.
Mm-hmm.
And at that moment, it's like, this is going to decide the game. I'm going to run in there, I'm going to take out 3 Dwarves, I'm going to be up 3 activations the next turn.
Yep.
And on 3 attacks, Vex did a total of 10 damage. It didn't kill a single Dwarf. It led to it still being a good game, but it's a game that felt like a more consistent fighter could have made a huge impact there, and Vex didn't.
Right. Like an Annihilator Prime would have won the game on the spot there, most likely.
Right.
But that's okay. I mean, that's part of what Vex is doing. And I think it's also part of why, just trying to demystify this whole Vexmor experience, right? When you play against Vexmor, you should have that in the back of your head that, like, they might whiff. So don't necessarily be always terrified all the time of what Vex can do. I think it's worth kind of outlining sort of the things that Vex is really good at and the things that they kind of struggle with. One of the places I really like Vexmor is when you're locked in combat with something twice Vexmor's size. just because of that strength and toughness. I mean, strength 10 is so silly. Uh, so
Yeah.
like anytime you're hitting on threes and they're hitting on fives and fours, and they paid 60 more points for their fighter, it just feels incredible. I don't know. Do you get to get Vex locked into big combats like that?
I mean, I feel like we haven't been seeing as many of those big combats since the Meta Watch.
That's
I
true.
haven't played against a FOMO or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I don't think I actually have, other than a couple of Stormcast,
Sure.
and I did play Ogres one time with Vex, and
Mm-hmm.
it does feel great when their average fighter is anywhere from like 40 to 80 points more than Vexmor, and you have a chance of taking them down.
Yeah.
That's definitely where it feels like you're getting the value out of Vex.
Yeah. I had Vex one-on-one against a Rotgut Trogoth, and it just felt so shocking that the Trogoth was 5 more points than Vex was.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, that felt crazy. It also felt, yeah. I think I agree with you that we're not seeing as many huge things generally as we used to, but I think that people will start going back to them a little bit more. I think this is a topic for another video, but one of my takes from both like the testing event we had and then the tournament that we played, and just like games I've played under the new Meta Watch, is the same stuff matters that mattered before.
yeah,
It feels like it's just your
yeah.
tools are different. Um,
I do think we're in a phase of people experimenting,
yeah,
and I think some of those experiments are going to be really cool, and a lot of them we're going to find out are not all that different from what we were playing a couple months ago.
right, right, yeah. So like playing against your blood kind, right? It was really like, oh right, just like having the biggest thing on the board that does the most stuff is really important. Anytime
Yeah,
killing things gives points, um, and we'll get to this more with Vex, but I think Vexmor is amazing because of how points efficient it is, and it does do cool stuff. I mean, we're going to get through all that, but um, there's a lot more that goes on a Warcry game. Um,
yeah,
Now, I do want to get to the situation you talked about being in combat with 3 dwarves and being like, oh man, I'm going to kill these 3 dwarves. Uh, when you do get to, I feel like when you do get to have multiple chaff models, I don't count dwarves necessarily. I mean, dwarves are a weird case because of
they
those
are. Yeah,
11th and 12th wounds. But anytime you have multiple 10 or 8 wound chaff models in its 2-inch bubble, like if you get to start a turn and you have 2 targets in that 2-inch bubble and neither of them are super high on wounds, it just feels incredible. Like anytime you only have to pay 180 points to just machine gun guys off the board like that, it just feels so unfair. Like that is the one place where Vex feels completely unfair is anytime that works out. Um, I don't know. Like have you had that work out?
I don't think I got to. The closest would have been in
Okay,
our game, and you had Vashtis putting -1 attacks on Vexmor pretty much the entire time.
sure.
Um, yeah, from my experience, the one time I maybe did do that was against a Soul Blade list, so killing things was nice, but they came right back. In
Sure,
my experience, Vex has been a lot more about the threat than what it's actually doing, and
sure.
the ability to threaten that is awesome. That you don't want to. One of the ways to handle T6 is to attack it a bunch, but you don't want to run 3 models into Vex at a time and just feed kills to it.
Sure. Yeah, like people avoid giving it that strength. And you had said you wanted to talk about like the board control aspect of Vex more. Like how does that feel when you're playing it?
I feel like people don't know how to play around it yet, and it's a really powerful tool. When you just
Mm-hmm.
put a piece down and they
Yeah.
kind of act like they've lost that quarter of the board without anything happening.
Right.
If Vex can get to an objective round one,
Mm-hmm.
it really feels like you've just taken that objective for the game, unless they have a very specific counter to Vex.
Yeah, I agree with that. Um, One of my opponents countered Vex by rampaging with a Vargeist and rolling 5 6s in however many attacks that was. I think that was a pretty good counter to Vex. Rolled nothing but sixes. That's always pretty good against toughness 6. But I agree. Like on normal rolls, it can feel pretty terrifying in that situation. Some places where I've found that Vex falls down a little bit. One is you really never want to have Vex arrive round 2. Just like anytime, some deployments, it doesn't matter because sometimes you arrive round 2, but then there's an objective pretty close to you, and then that's fine. Did you have very many games, either in testing or in the tournament, where Vex showed up in round 2?
So yeah, I had one game where Vex came on second. I tried to avoid that as much as I could with building the deployments for this pack.
Sure.
And you really felt it in that game. And again, that was my game against Dispossessed. So.
Oh, you lost that one. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, everything was kind of against Vex that game. Came in round 2, fighting 12 Wound Chaff. That game really did feel like there was an Annihilator. 2 Annihilators. I killed one in round 2. The other one got to threaten me the entire game, and had Vex come on the board earlier, that would have been a possible answer to that I just didn't have.
Sure. Yeah, I think I've found that Vexmor just really has a tough time coming on round 2. I mean, there was the game that you and I played where you just kind of stuck it there and fed it gores. There would be some missions where that would be less effective. I think the mission we played on, that was like the perfect strategy. Vex basically didn't get to score a point the entire game.
Yep.
But there would be some types of missions where that just wouldn't be sustainable, just depending on what is there for board coverage. But just in general, like order, I'm going to keep comparing Vex to Annihilator Primes because it's, similar, like only move 3, but incredibly points efficient combat stats. Order has ways to push Annihilator Primes around the board. You've got your Calthea, you've got your Quester Soulsworns, you've got your Pure Flood Seneschal. You've got a bunch of ways to kind of get an Annihilator Prime moving. You've got your Vulcan Flameseeker's Whippy Boy.
Order also lets you run 2 Annihilator Primes.
Yeah. You can also run 2 of them,
Vex.
right? Which you can't do with Vexmor. God, you wish you could run 2 Vexmors. And so Chaos can't do that. I mean, the closest thing is Sloppity Bile Piper, but I'm just not very interested in running Sloppity with Vexmor. Maybe I'll probably try it eventually, but in general, it's not super attractive to me. Only getting +1 movement is just so much less than getting +3 off of a Pure Flood Seneschal, or getting +3 on the other ways. So it's just tough to move Vex around the board. Yes, you have Lithe and Swift, which is incredible for just getting 2 attacks in or 2 dice in, but man, anytime you attack with Vex and you're not onslaughting, it just feels like such a missed opportunity. And so if you use Lithe and Swift, it's still like you're spending a double. There's a 44% chance, even if you do get an attack in, 44% chance that the attack just feels incredibly disappointing. So then Vex essentially starts partaking in the battle round 3, which is a tough place to be.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. I also find that Vex struggles specifically against dwarves. Can you tell me about your trials and tribulations against dwarves?
Yeah, I played Flameseekers in game 1 and Dispossessed in game 2. In Vex did get a couple of kills in game 1, but that was combining an onslaught and starting in round 1 and having a ton of targets.
Yeah.
In game 2, I think I maybe only took down 1 dwarf with her the entire game. She came in on round 2, had to move, so didn't start attacking until round 3, just like you said. And yeah, so with dwarves, you're really hoping for a hit and a crit off of just 2 dice.
Yeah.
Even if you do roll 2 crits, it's it's awesome and you're doing 20 damage, but it's the same effect as rolling a hit and a crit. So
right.
And I don't know what the stats are on trying to roll that, but it really doesn't feel good having your giant fighter just sit there and try to take down a couple little things the entire game. It's not what you got her for.
Yeah, and if it's like against Vulcan Flame Seekers where they have that reaction to turn crits into hits, all of a sudden that's a nightmare. Um,
Yep.
Even when you do get to Onslaught, it's still worse than a coin flip, which having your sort of giant scary thing use dice and still not kill the thing it attacked is just like such a disappointing place to be anytime you're attacking chaff or anytime you're attacking anything cheap, right? I mean, it feels like a really tough set of gambles to take. Now, I'm sure someone out there has played dwarves into Vexmor, and their opponent just kept winning the coin flip every round as far as getting those dwarves. And if Vex does kill 3 dwarves, then that's probably going to feel pretty good for you. But
Right.
man, like it's so easy to run up to 2. Like let's take scale breakers because I think they seem great into Vexmor. Like you run up to 2 scale breakers and you attack, you don't kill one, and then all of a sudden they're doing flaming weapons on you, and Vex might not even survive 4 attack steps from scale breakers, and those are little 95-point guys. So
Yeah.
that's just kind of a tough place to be, is fighting dwarfs when you're with Vexmor. I can't imagine having to deal with a swarm of Arcanauts.
Yeah, and that's what I was just gonna say. When you're looking at Flame Seekers and Arcanauts, that ranged attack too, having that
Mhm.
they can stay out of Vex's range. They don't have to group up on them.
Yep.
They can keep hitting them, and Vex is unlikely to take them out in one hit.
Yeah. It's a tough place to be. That's a really tough spot to be. So, I certainly, if I was thinking I was going to be going into a tournament where like lots of people are super excited about Vexmor, no one's gotten to try him yet, I would certainly be thinking very hard about taking some flavor of dwarf because they're so good against him. There are some.
They're good on their own too. You're never
Yeah.
going to regret taking dwarves.
Right. There's only a few bad dwarves out there. There are some things that I think you can do if you're a Vex pilot against dwarves that I think you and I will get to later, because when I was texting you about this, you had a couple things that I think are worth talking about. But before we get there, also the 16th wound is really tough. And that's specifically a wound that a lot of mid-range support wizards have.
Yeah.
Now, most people don't have a mid-range support wizard in their list, but I find if I play a tournament, I usually face 1 or 2. And it's usually really important to kill them early, and Vexmor is not the tool that kills them.
They're usually like a prime target that you pick the hunter for, and that's where Vex starts to show. It's hard to call it a weakness, but a downside.
Yeah.
I played against your Vashtis, and it was at 16 or 17 wounds, I think.
Yeah, 16.
Yeah, and combining that with the minus attack bubble, it took me 3 straight turns of attacking just to take out Vashtis.
Yeah. Yeah, that was pretty good. And I think the reason I lost that game was really because I didn't start trolling you with Vashtis right at the beginning of the game. So you scored that first point, and then I had to chase points, and then all of a sudden things were really rough. And if I had just like committed to, we're just Vashtis bubbling from my very first activation, every single round is Vashtis bubble, I think maybe I could have kept that game very close. So that's, I think, a good takeaway to learn is mid-range support wizards in general are just really nice to have against Vexmor players.
Yeah.
So let's talk about how you actually sort of incorporate Vexmor into a list based on, those strengths and weaknesses. I think my biggest takeaway is, and this is something that you and I had been theory crafting kind of from the beginning, was sort of pairing Vexmor with a big dragon piece, just something fast, something that's bigger than Vexmor. But I wanted to try a list that was a little weird like that didn't have something like that, to see if it was possible, to see if the overwhelming points efficiency could just kind of carry it on anything. And I I really came away thinking that Vexmor has to be the second coolest thing your list does. That was
I agree.
Yeah, like because in the Beasts of Chaos you played, the Bloodkind is still the coolest thing that list does, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of the goal. That's what Beasts of Chaos is lacking. They have a very well-rounded, large, heavy-hitting piece that's a little too expensive. So having Vex fill those gaps of it's not nearly as well-rounded, it's super spiky, but it's point efficient, so it can kind of be my tank, it can be my anti-tank piece.
Yeah.
And then that frees up the Bloodkind to just do what it wants to do.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it makes it so that it's like, well, if Vexmor was properly costed and the Bloodkind was properly costed, you wouldn't lose a single point out of your list, right? And so
right.
they absolutely complement each other well. Man, I think the FOMO nerf was huge for Beasts of Chaos. Do you feel that way when you play them?
It's hard to say. I had only just started playing the FOMO and Beast of Chaos. I got in,
Okay.
I think, 2 or 3 games with it. One of them was against you, and I was really liking that list. And it was the same thing. The FOMO felt like it filled in those gaps in Beast of Chaos so nicely.
Yeah.
I could still make a list work with it. The 10 points isn't the end of the world, but it hurts definitely.
I just remember you feeling like Doom Bowls felt weird to run in a world where FOMOs and Myrmidons exist. And then the Bloodkind for 265. Now that the Myrmidon is 275, it makes a lot more sense than...
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
So that was a recent thing I'd figured out. Bloodkind with +1 attack is basically the exact same profile as the Doom Bowl. It's 3 fewer wounds and I think 15 points cheaper.
Right.
But yeah, pre-nerf, it would have been competing directly with the FOMO and Myrmidon still. And so now that what would have been like a 10-point difference is now a 20-point difference, I think.
Yeah, which is really
points,
nice.
Something like that.
Or I think it's only 10 with the Myrmidon, right? 265 to 275.
Yeah, but it would have been the same cost before. It's now a 10-point difference.
Yeah. Still seems to feel pretty good. And I think part of the reason that I found that your list needs to have something else cool. Now, that doesn't necessarily need to mean like a massive, huge chonker, but it just needs to be threatening in a different way that is scarier than Vex is, because Vex just fails 1 out of 5 times. That's just part of it. And if you play 4 rounds failing 1 out of 5 times, chances are much better than 50% that you will fail 1 time in every game.
Right.
You'll probably, you'll have 1 game every now and then where Vex never falls on his face. But you'll probably have him embarrass himself at least 1 time per game. And so you want to be doing other really terrifying things. Now, what those things are, like let me put it, I think Vexmor is the best plan B in Chaos. Just because Annihilator Primes are great, right? But you really need to have a good plan A for a Vexmor list to be like really scary. I think the first thing you talked about, which was also going to be my number 1 thing to pair with Vexmor, is the Varangard. What are you excited about with a Varangard next to Vexmor?
So I did play this list in the last event I went to, and I want to give credit to Mike and Rob of 3 Heroes 1 Shaft, because they kind of helped me craft that list. Their biggest contribution was convincing me not to play Beast of Chaos for that event. But then they also did convince me to try out Vex.
Okay.
And so what I found there was just pairing the way people react to Vex is you either have to run away from it or like try to throw everything at it a lot of the times, and that just like really frees up the Varangard or any dragon. So if Vex sits on a point and they start to run away from that point, they're like already on the back foot, and the Varangard is so flexible for you to sneak in exactly where it needs to be. It can fight well. It's still a tank. I think the Varangard is a really great piece. It's just so expensive. So having something to back that up that isn't super expensive.
Yeah.
Before that, you were trying to back up a Varangard with something like a Myrmidon and that's you're 600 points into your list with those two.
Sure. I always liked backing up a Varangard with a whole bunch of Plague Bearers, but that's a separate set of things.
Yeah.
But as someone who, like, I really think the best answer to Vexmor is just to run a bunch of dwarves and ignore it.
Yep.
And Varangard is the number one dwarf killer in the game.
Right.
Like the way that a Varangard can just like run around the board murdering dwarves with so much ease is just really terrifying anytime you play dwarves. And so I just love the way it just covers Vexmor's biggest Achilles heel just so nicely, right, which I think is really exciting.
It does all the things Vex can't do.
Yeah, it's fast. Its damage spike in different places. Yeah, I mean, 16 wounds is also actually kind of an annoying place to deal with for a Varangard, but at least you have like the ability to kind of reach out and touch those pieces really quickly.
Right.
For any
the Varangard also, because of its dice abilities, feels so consistent.
Yeah.
When you're rolling so many dice, it just averages out a lot more.
Yes,
so
it does.
You're not as afraid of Vex not performing when you have something that almost always performs.
Right. Yeah, just because you get to roll 6 dice, which is just so nice to do. And even the other Varangards are kind of nice in that you could just roll even more dice if you wanted to and have an even smoother curve. They aren't necessarily quite as good at killing dwarves, but that's okay. And I think the other sort of big, sort of not Varangards are also pretty good with this. I think that Vexmor is a really solid way if you've been struggling with certain factions that are not very good in Chaos, because most Chaos factions are pretty bad. Any of the factions that have a big flapper, like I think Tzeentch Arcanites, I really want to try them with Vexmor, because AV Arc on disc has always disappointed me in faction there. It just like, it doesn't do the thing that Zangors need help with. And so bringing in Vexmor and then also having the AV Arc, and now all of a sudden they balance each other, could be interesting. I think Vexmor gives new life to Mindstealer Spheranxes. I haven't tried that, but just being able to run around. I know they don't kill dwarves, but they're just a reasonable damage piece in general. And then the fact that they can net things is so nice. So all of those sort of really big, fast models, I think, just go with Vexmor so well.
I've been playing with the Spheranx a little bit recently, and I hadn't actually considered that it does, similar to the Varangard, Vex does a good job at doing the things the Spheranx is bad at.
Yeah.
And then the Spheranx gets to focus on being a very fast, pretty durable kind of utility piece.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And then I think that Flamethrowers from Horns of Hashut is a pretty nice plan A to have with Vexmor. Just because they can reach out and touch things. Like, they do some of the things that Vexmor doesn't do, though in a very different way, which I think is interesting. Also, you ran a War Queen with Vexmor, right?
I did not. No,
okay,
I ran Lasavir, Vexmor, and Varangard.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you?
I haven't. I'm always on the verge of running a War Queen. I've considered it every time I've run a Vex, but I haven't actually run that combo yet.
I'm skeptical, but I feel like it needs to be tried, of a +1 attack bubble with Vexmor. The only issue is that's not really a plan B anymore. That is just a plan A. So I almost wonder if it's got to be like a Vexmor and, a Myrmidon, or like just kind of the old, like a War Queen and a Myrmidon and Vexmor.
Yeah, which is that. The old list I ran was Myrmidon, War Queen, and FOMO. And what is kind of like, Vex is not a 1-for-1 replacement to the FOMO.
Yeah.
But so many Chaos Warbands were running the FOMO Red Crusher just because it was T6, Strength 6, it could deal damage.
Yeah.
And now you have an option that is a full 90 points cheaper, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Which in most factions, it's like, that's another body, or upgrading one of your heroes to a better option. Like, so much flexibility that Chaos didn't have before. That, yeah, Vex and War Queen on its own, you're really kind of hoping for the stars to align for that to be really good.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that's the list you're going to run. I think something like Myrmidon or Varangard with the War Queen and with Vex.
Yeah, I think that.
And then you're still going to get anywhere from 4 to 6 Marauders in there too.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I agree, because FOMO Crusher, it was so ubiquitous because it was points efficient, but a lot of lists you run it in, you really wish you could have put one more Chaff model and an Annihilator Prime in there. And now you have an Annihilator Prime, which is great, which is really nice. I mean, you have this weird spiky Annihilator Prime. I mean, it's so funny. I think Vexmor is just as good, but just so much weirder, which is, that's what Chaos is supposed to be compared to Order, so it's fine. But this last one, I think, might be a little bit more difficult now post Meta Watch, where a lot of the good chaff was kind of nerfed, but I do wonder about like a swarm of chaff plus Vexmor. Like if you could find a way to put like a 13 model list together, if Vexmor is just like the one thing that fights in a list like that. I've wondered if that could be reasonable. If you used Vashtis, for example, for the -1 attack buff to try to keep your chaff alive, and then you just like Vexmor is your only guy who can fight. I'm very curious if something like that could work.
Chaos is in a little bit of a weird spot with that right now.
Mm-hmm.
With the Plague Bearers just got nerfed, and so I feel like the Marauder, I'm probably biased because I love Slaves of Darkness and the Marauders. The Marauder feels like a very solid, durable chaff piece.
Yeah, I agree. The Marauder is the best chaff standing left in Chaos.
Their reaction pairs so well with Vastus' ability.
Oh yeah,
everything is coming at you, less likely to kill you. You heal.
Yep.
But I don't think you're getting a 13 model list together. I'd have to look at the math on that.
No, you're not. Yeah.
Could you? I mean, your next best option is horns, I guess. But then are you losing your flamethrowers? So I don't know what that swarm looks like in Chaos right now, and I'm very cautious about telling people to go out and buy Marauders right now, and we don't know what's happening with Slaves to Darkness rules and the Dark Oath.
Yeah, Marauders could be gone next week, or they could be still the best little guys in Chaos for a year, and we have no idea which of those two worlds we're going to live in. Yeah.
My problem is between playing Slaves to Darkness and Beasts of Chaos, all of my lists have a backbone of 60-point chaff. And if the new Marauders come out and they're 65 points, it's going to completely shake my world.
Ruin everything.
List anymore.
Yep. You'll have to go to Horns of a Shit now that they have 60-point chaff.
It's my only option.
Yeah, I think Chaos's ability to do a chaff swarm is kind of gone, but they still have playable cheap bodies. It's just like, I don't think you can have your cheap bodies be carrying your warband anymore. I
don't think so either. I think a lot of good Chaos lists are looking like 8 or 9 bodies right now, not 10 plus.
Yeah. I still think you could do 10 plus if it was with Marauders, because I think they're good enough. And I think you could with Horns. It's just like, why would you? Because you could have flamethrowers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Now, I do want to talk about Vexmor's friends, because I think this is a big part of the package. We have Lasavir, we have Vashtis. We can just quickly talk about what they do. Vashtis, the Coiled Lash, is a double. Until the end of the battle round, enemy fighters cannot make disengage actions while within 1 inch of this fighter. At the end of the battle round, allocate a number of damage points equal to half the value of this ability to each visible friendly fighter within 1 inch of this fighter. Just a quick hint for the people, don't use this ability. The other thing that Vashtis does is Discordant Disruption. Until the end of the battle round, subtract 1 from the attack's characteristic of attack actions made by enemy fighters while they are within 6 inches of this fighter. This ability is the reason not to use the other one. This ability is incredible on a double. Infernal and Rapturous, I think, was criminally underplayed. The one tournament that we went to where you and I TO'd, and I just played kind of a meme Slaanesh list that was around the Infernal and Rapturous. And then I did really, I won all my games except against Micah's KO that won the tournament. Infernal Enraptress just was always really good. Is still good. You could still play it. But Vashtis having that ability for 50 fewer points is really nice.
Yeah.
Lasavir has an ability, the Bladed Blessing. This fighter makes a bonus melee attack action. Subtract 3 from the toughness characteristic of the target of that attack action to a minimum of 1 for that attack. Did you like running Lasavir?
I was amazed at how much I like Lasavir.
Really?
I kind of wrote the friends off. That's another one that I have to give credit to. I think that one was specifically Rob at 3 Heroes 1 Chaff.
Mm-hmm.
He really showed me in our demo game that Lasavir can really sneak up on people. And getting hit by an extra attack you're not expecting for 6 dice,
Sure.
That can do a lot of damage. I don't think it's like a game-changing piece, but for 135 points...
Sure.
You know, you're taking a hero slot for that, which a lot of times you're doing really cool stuff with your heroes.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're already taking Vex, you've already got a super efficient fighter. Lasavir for 130, you know, you've got 2 really cool pieces that are like combined the price of some other giant pieces in the game.
Sure.
And it just does entirely different things than Vex. And it does them, I think, kind of surprisingly well. So it's a lot of fun. I don't know if it's good, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. For me, it's like, I think that triple is worth something like 7 or 9 damage, which is tough to me because there's a lot of doubles that are worth 7 or 9 damage. But, you know, it's still okay if you are using it to kind of sneak up on people.
Yep.
I really like Vashtis just because the control it gives you. I also love how good it is against opposing Vexmors. It just is great against Titans in general. I think we're going to start seeing more and more big Titan pieces as people start to remember that they're still good. And I think Vashtis is just so good in that situation. Also, I just love anytime you get to just use doubles, like game-changing doubles just feel so much better than game-changing triples.
It's so consistent, yeah. Like, you just didn't have to think about having the doubles to use that every turn when we played.
Yeah.
The thing about Lasavir's triple that I will say quick is that -3 toughness can be so relevant. And like you said, it's only, 7 to 9 points of damage. But if it's 7 to 9 points of damage on a T6 thing that you're not getting a lot of damage on, that can that could be the damage that takes it down sometimes.
Sure.
It's situational, but I do think it has situations where it's really good.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and for the points, like, I like Lasavir more than I like a Vindictor. Right?
Right, yeah.
For that same points. So certainly, I mean, everything in Warcry is relative. The one thing I would say, having played with the friends, is people shouldn't feel precious about cutting the friends. The friends are good, but the reaction for Vexmor is just not that impactful. Usually people will be able to make, usually your opponent is going to be able to make a sober decision about whether or not it's worth it to them to kill your Vex friend. And they'll do it when they want your guy dead more than they care about the extra activation, and they won't do it when they don't care about killing your guy. And I think generally that reaction is just like a nice little thing to have on the side, but it's not that impactful. And a lot of the time people will kill Vexmor before they kill the friends, and like a bonus attack on Vashtis is essentially meaningless. A bonus attack on Lasavir can be very meaningful.
It can be, yeah.
A bonus move on Lasavir can lose you the game because you just move when you don't need to. But because Lasavir needs to be in combat, but really doesn't want to be in combat when it's not killing the thing it's attacking.
It wants to make the calls on when it's in combat.
Right. So like random move actions are not valuable. It's really just valuable if like Lasavir tried to kill something and failed. Um,
Yeah.
so I think in general that reaction is just so nice, but I think it's so much less impactful than it reads. Is I guess what I would
I
say.
think it's just similar to Vex in general. Like you read that and you think of the best case scenarios,
Mm-hmm.
and those are kind of fringe cases.
Right.
It can be super impactful, but it's like you're really hoping you get an attack out of Vex on that, but that might be your 1 out of 5 that completely whiffs.
Right.
Even when it does work out, they can be so good, but they're not super consistent.
And your attack on Vex doesn't get onslaughted, so it's only a two
Right?
dice attack, so it'll whiff
Yep.
44% of the time,
Yeah. There you go.
which is not as exciting. It is exciting when it's a move. Anytime you get to move Vex, that's really nice. But
Yep. Yeah. If Vex is within 5 inches of anybody, that you love that action.
yeah, absolutely. Um, but yeah, I would just say to people like only run the friends if you feel like your list will be better with the friends. Don't run them just to run them. Now I do think Vashtis is amazing. I think I'm excited to try Lasavir now that you seem so into it. Um, and 6-inch move does sort of. There are a lot of warbands that would love a 6-inch move fighter.
Yeah.
That part is very relevant. I like to. I'm at a place where I just really like. I don't care that much about movement for most of my army, but I like having at least two
Having
fast
just
things.
one or two pieces that can
Yeah.
really move is so nice. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
I
go
think
on.
all of them are good. I think they're all
Mm-hmm.
playable.
Yeah.
And I guess another thing worth noting is that is their unique reaction. They still have the regular Slaanesh reaction as well.
Yeah. Yeah. They do.
But it's just that reaction is not worth building around. That's not your game plan. It's just kind of like something that might happen, and when it happens, it might be really good, but you don't count on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the only fighter in the game that can build around that reaction is the homunculus. The 55-point little weirdo in Slaanesh Mortals.
Yeah.
I think otherwise building around that reaction is tough. I play Scions of the Flame a little bit, and that reaction is nice to have, but only because you're already pressuring damage onto opponents, and then you
Yeah.
get to reflect lots of damage all the time. Like Vashtis, for example, is just not interested in that reaction because she's not trying to put damage around. Lasavir
And
maybe
I
a
was
little
talking
bit more
about
so.
the Thricefold reaction.
You mean you mean getting
The
bonus actions for
their
them.
specific
Yeah.
reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree.
It can be really good, but you don't assume you're going to get a ton of value out of that.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't need to because all the fighters are still pretty good without it.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I would put them both in this spot of like playable, but not like just don't feel like you can't cut them. Like you can absolutely cut them.
I didn't run any of them in my list last weekend.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you
I
were
was
better for it because every other fighter in your list was better than either of these. Yeah. Absolutely.
Including the Slaughter Priest.
We can have that conversation another time. All right, so let's talk about like actual lists. And the list you sent me was not that different from how I would run Slaves to Darkness in there, so I included that. And then I also wanted to show a not very competitive Vexmor list because I do think, people like to run powerful fighters in their list. Vexmor is a powerful fighter, and so I think it's worth talking about how to play Vex sort of casually for people who aren't competitive weirdos, because there's probably 3,000 casual Warcry players and maybe 200 competitive ones. Probably fewer, probably more like 100. So it's worth, I think, talking about a few different power levels that we can play it in. But let's start with the highest. Because I do think Slaves to Darkness is the best home for Vexmor. I feel like a lot of people kind of had that pegged pretty early on. I don't think it's been any surprise that Varen guards are just like the best friend to have.
Right.
But yeah, tell me what you like about like just having this super simple version. with 9 fighters, Vex, Lasavir, and Varangard.
It kind of just checks all the boxes I want in a list.
Mm-hmm.
9 fighters means 3 in each deployment. That just makes my brain happy for some reason. But it's
Sure.
also a super solid number. 8 fighter lists are super common. And
Mm-hmm.
having that one extra activation feels good.
I agree.
But also with the Varangard, there's a chance you're taking someone out in round 1, and then you're up 2 activations for a good portion of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Like we talked about, Vex and Varangard do 2 entirely different things. In the pack I played them in, the deployments are pretty skewed, so I got to put them both in the hammer. They both came on 3 out of 4 games, and I got to just kind of have free reign of who's going to get the most power out of their first activation.
Yeah.
Lasavir is kind of like an assassin in that list. You've got your 2 major threats that the enemy is focused on the entire time, and Lasavir is maybe just moving 12 inches to steal a point, is maybe eating some chaff, and then Marauders are just super solid. I play the 60-point ones with the flails. That 3-inch range is so nice. A lot of the time, they're just reacting and trying to stay alive, and they're really good at staying alive. So, this is kind of like a perfect list for my playstyle. You've got your 2 really good heroes. You've got kind of like a utility backup hero, and then just chaff that are good at playing the objective game and playing the mission.
One thing I love about Marauders with Vexmor is you can put a Marauder base to base behind Vexmor, and no 1-inch reach thing can come get you without the Marauders being able to hit it. Like anytime you have just a big chunky thing that's hard to kill in front of 3-inch reach chaff, it just feels so strong because being able to hit it with a bunch of little weirdos is so good. Little weirdos tend to actually be more damage efficient than like bigger fighters. The issue is that they die before they get to attack. So anytime you can just protect them with a fat base in front of them and still have them attacking is just wild. And so anytime you can have Vexmor, I mean, this was like when I played Scions of the Flame, this was basically the only viable strategy to try with Scions. It was the only thing that was working, was just like get a big guy engaged with a few of their people and then just swing with, just make sure that every single one of your little 3-inch reach initiates gets to get at least 2 attack steps in. Like 4.
The nice thing about Lasavir in this combo is a lot of times those big guys are only 1-inch reach. So if they get behind you and they engage the Marauders, your big guy now can't swing over them. Vexmor can.
Yeah, and Vexmor having that 2-inch reach is so huge for that. Agreed. Because Marauders have a 25 millimeter base, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So that's less than an inch. So a Marauder base to base with Vexmor, again, no 1-inch fighter can attack the Marauder without Vexmor being able to attack the 1-inch reach fighter, which is just great. So just like, just putting 2 Marauders base to base right behind Vexmor is just like, that's such a strong way to end round 1. Vexmor up in your opponent's face on a really important part of the battlefield with 2 Marauders base to base behind it, I think is just one of the best setups that is available to Chaos right now. Certainly, I think the best non-Horns of Hashut setup in Chaos right now would be that, which is cool.
Yeah, I think so. This is the kind of stuff I was playing a lot before the Meta Watch and the FAQ update. And I think after the update, it's pretty clear this is one of the best things.
Yeah. I do think that just random Vexmor list number 1 that isn't in Slaves to Darkness is going to be a lot less scary. I think a lot of the other non-Varangard friends that can go with Vexmor do work well, but don't work quite as well. I'm definitely going to play a lot of AV Arc on disc with Vexmor because I just like Zangors, and like having just a functional way to play Zangors is just so nice to be able to do. But I don't think those lists are going to be nearly as good as what Slaves to Darkness can do with Vexmor. There's some stuff that you can do if you drop the Blessing on the Varangard, have a normal Varangard, drop Lassevier and 1 Marauder, you can free up a lot of points to do other cool stuff too. Like just to upgrade Lassevier into something really big and scary.
I think that's definitely enough points for the shield and sword Ogreroid. It might be enough for the axe Ogreroid as well.
Sure. Yeah, because you're getting up to like 220 or something there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd have
so
to
you
actually.
You would be able to bless him if you really want to, but it's as your like third most scary thing.
Yeah,
that's pretty good.
What is actually 165 plus 60? We're smart people. We can find calculators.
225.
225. Okay, so
yeah.
That's not up to Great Axe Blessed, which is the way you want to run Great Axe.
Yep.
But it does give you regular Great Axe, which is still great.
Yeah.
Man, that actually sounds really nice. Also for 225, you can get a Slangor Slakeorn, which
yes,
is sweet. I do think Slangor Slakeorn is a little bit mediocre as a competitive piece. It's like just good enough to be sort of playable, but I think it's bordering on meme. But I do think it sort of does a lot of what Vex loves in a friend. That charge ability means that you can attack things from so far away. The way it only uses doubles, because you can spam a lot of doubles usually. So this little not terribly competitive Slaanesh list with Slakehorn, Vexmor, Vashtis, Slake Slash, another Fiend Blood, and then just 2 Homunculi is, I think, a really fun way to run Vexmor in kind of a silly themed Slaanesh list that is still going to feel extremely functional because it has all the things you need to complement Vexmor. It's got the speed. It's got it's still a list where Vexmor is really the plan B. It's got, all of these little creepy, sexy goats just kind of running around Vexmor, getting their charges, flying. And then Vexmor is just kind of controlling one section of the board, hopefully the center, if you can, because they're so good at flying around the edges. Using flying fast and loose, I mean just moving very fast and attacking around the edges. I don't think it's points efficient enough to be super competitive because you're not going to be, this list wants to be using, 5 doubles in a round?
yeah.
You're probably only going to use 2 or 3. And so, the regular Fiend Blood is not that good when it's not using a double. So for an actual tournament, I wouldn't run this, but this is the kind of wild theme list that Vexmor can really improve. I think players should not feel stigmatized. One of the reasons I wanted to do a video kind of demystifying this piece is because Vexmor is just another fighter with strengths and weaknesses, just like 95% of the fighters in the game. Is it very good, and does it open up new competitive possibilities for Chaos as a Grand Alliance? Absolutely. But it's not in like a giant in the hillside boogeyman kind of space, in my opinion.
I definitely don't think Vex pushes into unfair. I think it's a very good piece, but I don't think it's doing anything the other Grand Alliances haven't already been doing.
Yeah, agreed.
Maybe a couple of things. It's got a couple unique twists to it. I definitely think there is a stigma against Vex, and probably going to be for a little bit while people get used to it. Mm-hmm. But there was a stigma around FOMO Crusher, too, for the longest time.
Yeah.
I think it's going to have more to do with how often you see Vex than how effective Vex actually is in game.
Yeah, I think so.
Because I do think we're going to see a lot of Vex.
Yes, and I think much like FOMO Crusher, I think we're going to see a lot of Vex being cute more than Vex being really, really good. Because FOMO Crusher was like that too. Like you saw so many sort of bespoke plus FOMO Crusher lists where like FOMO Crusher is just this big thing that all it needs is a double, and it would just take up some of the board, move around, and your sort of cute, silly bespoke list could do its cute, silly thing on the edges, while FOMO Crusher was the actual thing your warband was about.
Yep.
But it wasn't actually just like being a menace at tournaments. It was just like making a lot of bad warbands fine. Uh, and I think Vexmor has that potential for any warband with with just like a random big fast leader who hasn't gotten to shine before. Like Corn Demons is one of the worst warbands in the game, but you could still put that one demon that sits on a rhino, and then you could put that with Vexmor, and then you could have a couple dogs, and you're like doing stuff, right? I mean, I think that's kind of what Vexmor can do without necessarily being good in that situation.
I agree. Yeah. I also think like you keep comparing Vex to the Annihilator Prime, and in a similar way, Thunderstrike is kind of like the pub stompy gatekeeping faction.
Sure.
I think people are going to feel a similar way about Vex, with the difference being people blame all of Thunderstrike for what the Annihilators can do. People are going to specifically focus on Vex as the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think, though, to go back to the Annihilator comparison, like Annihilator Primes are not ubiquitous in Order, and I really think Annihilator Primes are about equally powerful to Vexmor. But Order just does so many other things that you just don't always see a Prime. I mean,
yeah,
I think actually they're kind of almost underplayed. I do think they're very, very good, but I don't think they're so good that's like I never see an Order list that doesn't have one and go like, oh, you're just wrong. Like that, I would never think that. I think Vexmor should kind of be thought of in a similar way. But Chaos has fewer good toys than Order does.
Exactly. There's so little in that like 175 to 200 point range in Chaos. That's like, yeah, that's the thing every list wants to do, and I think Vex can do that.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that's more to do with the failings of Chaos than the power of Vex.
Yeah, I'm working on a video right now on like the danger of doing cool things, and I've just been trying to play my sweet Exalted Deathbringer over and over and over in different types of lists, as an ally, as just the leader in Khorne, and it just keeps being decent and not good, and not embarrassing. It's never embarrassing, but it's just barely decent. And Chaos just has so many fighters in that range. Like the Exalted Deathbringer is 185 points, right? It competes directly with Vexmor as like a brawler, and he is just kind of worse in every way, but he was always not good enough. So the fact that Vex is like in line with the competitive things that are in the game, I don't think it's just that the other Chaos things are not in line with the competitive stuff in the game.
I mean, I joke with you about the Slaughter Priest a lot because that's kind of becoming like a pet model of mine.
Mm-hmm.
But it's 15 points more than Vex. If I have to choose between the two of them, it feels like Vex is clearly the right choice every time.
Right. Like even at the same points, you would think that?
Yeah, probably.
I think so too. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's really Chaos's problem that if people get upset with Vexmor, let's blame Slaughter Priests for not being quite good enough when Vexmor
it was good enough in our game. That's
it.
all that matters.
Yeah, that's true. And like, yeah, just I mean, fixing Chaos is like a totally different subject that I've already dedicated multiple videos to. But I do think that Vexmor is pretty cool. I do like I remember we talked about this at the tournament, but I do like that Vexmor is a fighter who is like specifically weak to a class of fighter who never gets played.
Yep.
In terms of, like, we talked about support wizards and dwarves because those are the fighters in this weight class that actually do get played. But generally, like, mid-range punch you up a bit fighters that cost between 110 and 150 points, those fighters are just not good. And those fighters actually give Vex trouble.
Yeah. I mean, that was basically all of Vulcan Flameseekers.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's that game, I didn't feel like Vex really got to shine.
Yeah. And so I think that that's kind of a cool meta place for Vexmor to be. Unfortunately, I think a lot of those mid-range warbands have other problems that are still going to exist, but I do think they're in a much better place than they were 2 months ago before the meta watch. So hopefully we see a little bit more of that. But I agree, like Vulcan Flameseekers, I wouldn't really want to be playing Vexmor against Monster Killers either, for example. They just have so many ways to crack armor.
Yeah, they do.
Or just
I was
just the bone
very
saw.
worried about that game.
Did you end up playing against Monster Killers?
I did, yeah. I got lucky a couple times.
Sure.
Rolled 4 dice, then I saw them up and rolled 2 pair.
That's pretty nice.
You know how Monster Killers go.
I ended up randomly winning, not because of Vexmor, but because the one Blood Warrior who I brought specifically because I didn't have enough points for 2 more Marauders, ended up fighting 2 neck slicers and winning. Which was really nice. The Blood Warrior, with the really stupid looking weapon, is really great when you're onslaughting him. So that was a great place to be. Yeah. Thank you for coming on, Cody. This is, I think, everything we could possibly talk about in a video that's only about one fighter.
A single model.
Yeah. But I'm really glad we did this. This is, I think, a fighter that I'm very excited to talk about. I'm excited to see more people play. I do think he's fun. I think anytime you're in that situation where you whiff like multiple times in a row, I think it'll make some people tear their hair out. Maybe some people won't like how random Vexmor seems, but I do think it's really interesting. Do you have any closing?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I was going to ask if you had any closing thoughts on him.
Yeah, I think Vex is super cool. I think everything about it reads so scary when you first look at it, and that scares a lot of people.
Sure.
Strength 10 is insane. All that really means, like, it's essentially no different than Strength 8. It just means you can't do anything to make Vex not hit on 3s. It's always hitting on 3s.
Right.
And that is what kind of identifies Vex as the ultimate anti-tank piece, which is so cool because I don't think we have anything like that really. It is it's got such a cool role. It's decent when it's not doing that role. It's really cool when it is doing that role. And so I think it does awesome things for the game. It kind of has its own play style and really opens up other play styles.
Yeah.
There's things about Vex I don't love. I don't love that it's I think right now only in a $90 Underworlds box. I don't love Underworld's fighters having this big of an impact on the game, and I think that leads to some weird list building.
I agree with that.
At the end of the day, it's like it's a cool model, and I think people should play it. But don't expect it to suddenly, make all your lists good. You still need to build a good list around it, and you still need to play it well. And if you're playing against Vex, it's not as scary as it looks, and there are ways to play around it. So you can kind of think of it like an Annihilator Prime. You can kind of treat it like any other slow tank. The things that are good against those fighters are still good against Vex. You just need to be aware of what Vex does because you are going to see it, and you need to learn how to play around that.
Yeah, and I think the sort of the price lock, issue is a real one. Vexmor essentially costs $90, which sucks. Yeah. I want people to show me, man, where can they actually send this to me? Either way, I just want people to show me their Vexmor proxies. I don't own regular Vexmor. I just own some random creature caster demons that I have other hobby vexations with. But I want to see people's Vexmor proxies because I think any weird demon can be Vexmor. Any weird demon that looks like it has reach can be Vexmor.
Yep.
I was thinking about Gutrot Spume as a Nurgle Vexmor.
Oh, that's very cool.
I was thinking, yeah, there's a lot of sort of third-party weird demons that can go on a 40 millimeter base. I want to see people's cool hobby replacements for Vexmor because it being locked behind a $90 box means that people should take matters into their own hands.
Yeah, I agree. I do own the actual model, and as soon as I got it, remembered I have a sweet Archaon on a 40 millimeter base. That's a pretty good proxy, I think. So I haven't actually played the real model yet.
Oh, funny, you haven't even played it? That's really funny.
No, I built it and never painted it.
That's funny. You should probably sell it while it's still hot.
Yeah, that might be a good idea.
All right. Well, this was a great chat. Thanks for coming on, Cody, as always. Once again, you've saved Warcry. So until the next time Warcry needs saving, thank you so much. And for everyone out there, may all your rolls be crits. Except for when you play Vexmor against me, because critting for 10 is not reasonable.